What is up, everybody? My name is Heath Adams, and I welcome you to this course called Linux for Ethical Hackers. So, in this course, we're going to be covering a lot of things. We're really going to be going and hammering down on the terminal and the command line. And if you've never learned Linux before, this is a really great start for you, especially if you're interested in becoming an ethical hacker or a penetration tester. So, enough of my face. Let's go ahead and just dive right in. All right, everyone, welcome to this course titled Linux for Ethical Hackers. Before we get started, I'd like to do a little who am I? So my name is Heath Adams. I also go by the Cyber Mentor. I am a husband first, a hacker, a military veteran, a gamer, sports fan, and animal dad. I am a former accountant turned security geek, so I've been in cybersecurity about 3 years now. And before that, I was an accountant, hated it, picked that field for all the wrong reasons. So once I went into IT and cybersecurity, I never looked back, and I've never been happier. On the day-to-day, I am a senior security engineer. I'm also a business owner at TCM Security. So before that, I was a senior penetration tester doing penetration testing and ethical hacking. I branched out and started my own business focusing on ethical hacking, training, and student development. So now I'm doing that full-time along with a job as a senior security engineer. So I also run a couple projects. One is called VeteranSec. You can find that at veteransec.com. It's also known as VetSec. So what that is a group of military veterans and current military members from any country. That doesn't matter. It's people from that background who are focused on cybersecurity or want to break into cybersecurity. So we have a Slack channel of about 600 people, and we all just chat with each other, network, do resume critiques, and really just try to help each other grow. So it's a really, really great platform if you are a military veteran or you're in the military and you're looking to get into cybersecurity. We are also registered as a nonprofit, so it is a great organization, and hopefully we look forward to doing really great things here coming in the near future. The other project that I run is called the Cyber Mentor. That is really like my online identity. So you can find more about me at thecybermentor.com. A quick rundown is I am a Twitch streamer and a YouTuber. So my passion is training and content development. I started out doing YouTube around ethical hacking and walkthroughs, etc. And then it's kind of branched out just into cybersecurity and, doing some fun videos as well. My Twitch stream has been mostly ethical hacking walkthroughs and things around that. So I stream once a week. I also produce the content and upload it to YouTube. So if you're interested in that kind of content and you like this course, please do check me out on either Twitch or YouTube. If you want to chat after this course or you have any questions, you can hit me up at the Cyber Mentor on Twitter. I also have two blogs. One is veteransec.com. That is a community type blog, meaning that I'm not the only one who writes there, but I do occasionally write at that site. And I also write at tcm-sec.com, which is the TCM security website. You'll find more of a high-level, C-level type blog there and some technical, but I like to save a lot of my technical writing for the veteransec.com. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about what we'll learn in this course. So this course is going to be all hands-on. Besides this little introduction here, you're not going to see a lot of PowerPoint besides quick overview of what the course or the video that you're about to see has coming. So 95% hands-on course. I will not kill you with PowerPoint. That's not my goal. We're going to be focusing on Kali Linux this entire course and really learning Linux for the purpose of becoming ethical hackers. So we're going to install VMware, which is a virtualization software, and then we're going to run Kali Linux inside of VMware. After that, I'm going to give you a overview of Kali Linux, show you some of the common tools, what it can do, why it's awesome, and then we're going to do a deep dive into the terminal. So what that means is we're going to be hands-on, doing commands and learning Linux. So we'll be navigating the file system, so how to get around in the file system from the terminal. We'll learn about users and privileges, how to add users, what kind of privileges and permissions are there, what important files exist regarding those. We're going to talk about common network commands. So if you want to be a pen tester, ethical hacker, you need to know networking at least at a basic minimum. So we'll talk about those common network commands that you should know, how to run them, what they do. We'll talk about viewing, creating, and editing files. That's obviously important if you want to create a quick file or edit a file from the command line, how you can do that. We'll talk about starting and stopping services such as a web server, SSH, a SQL database, etc. We're going to talk about how to install updates, how to install tools, and how to update those tools. And then lastly, we're going to put everything we learned together and do some scripting in Bash. So we're going to write a basic Bash script, and then we'll improve upon it. And then I'll show you some for loops, some other logical scripting ideas, and then we'll kind of put that together and hopefully come to a nice completion when it's all said and done. So with all this being said, I am excited to have you in the course with me. I look forward to teaching you, and let's go ahead and start with installing VMware. All right, the first thing that we're going to need to do is to install software called VMware Workstation Player. Now we have two ways to run Kali Linux. We can either run Kali Linux through a virtual machine, or we can install it as an operating system on a hard drive. For this course and this lesson, we're going to be using a virtual machine, and preferably we're going to be using VMware Workstation Player. I'm going to show you how to install VMware Workstation Player, and I'll show you some of the alternatives to it as well. So let's go ahead and dive right in. Okay, so if you go out to the interweb and you go to Google and you type in VMware Workstation Player, the first thing that'll come up for you is this download VMware Workstation Player link. You're going to go ahead and just click on this. And now I also want to introduce alternatives. So there is another software platform called Oracle VirtualBox, and you will be able to install either. My preference and the course that's going to be taught the rest of the way through is going to be in VMware Workstation Pro. But we will use Player for the install. You'll be able to follow along with Player. You'll also be able to follow along with Oracle VirtualBox if you so choose, but we will not be showing that installation. Another thing that should be noted is there is this comparison page here, and I will be using VMware Workstation Pro. There's a nice little checklist here that shows what Pro can do versus Player. It has a lot of the same features here. Some of the nice things is running multiple VMs at once. You can technically do that with VMware Workstation Player. There's workarounds for it, but to have it in a single tabbed interface, it's very, very nice. You see here the draggable tabbed interface. That's another feature. Snapshots, so basically making a backup of your machine, all included in Workstation Pro. So if you have some money to shell out, and this is something that you are interested in doing long term, it may be worth looking into a Workstation Pro license. But by all means, you can get away with a Workstation Player installation, and that's exactly what we're going to do. So let's go back to the first tab here. And you can see it says try VMware Workstation Player. We're just going to scroll down, and this install and everything is going to be running on top of Windows for me. If you're installing for Linux, that's fine as well. Just follow your instructions for your respective OS. Go ahead and select download now. I'm going to save the file. Okay, it downloaded. I'm going to hit run. It's going to ask if we want to accept the changes. Yes. Okay, now we're going to hit next. We'll accept the license agreement and possibly give away our firstborn. I'm going to go ahead and check yes for the enhanced keyboard driver. We don't need to check for a product update. We don't need to join the VMware Customer Experience Improvement. We'll hit next on that. You can leave both of these checked or check to your preference, and then hit install. And while this is installing, I can actually show you what VMware Pro looks like. This is a Pro instance running here. You can see that I have the tabs and they're draggable as it was notated in that differential spreadsheet that you saw. And I've got a Kali instance running. That's actually my main Kali machine. I've got Windows 10 running here, and this is all actually sitting on top of a real Windows 10 machine as well. So we're just installing Workstation Player. I'm going to run a VM inside of a VM, so it's going to be a little bit of VMception here. And then we're just going to hit Finish. And then we are going to restart this machine as it needs a reboot real quick. Okay, now we are restarted and we're back to our desktop here. You can see that VMware Workstation Player has been added to the desktop. Let's just go ahead and double click that to open it. And we're going to choose to use VMware Workstation 15 Player for free for non-commercial use. If we wanted the Pro Edition, we would enter in our access key here, our license key, and continue on with the Pro Edition. And now we will use the Finish button here, and we will be brought to our VMware Workstation 15 Player. So you can see here that it's a much different view. It's very basic. We have the option to open a VM here, and we'll have the one VM stored in this tab that we can open up, and that'll be it. There are ways around running multiple VMs at the same time, but if you're looking to build a fluid lab out and have multiple VMs running similar to what I have here, having the VMware Pro, again, it does have its benefits here. So you could see this is a much different look. This is very generic, as we can see here. So from here, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and stop. In the next video, we are going to focus on downloading Kali Linux, and we'll talk about what Kali Linux is and some of its features as well. So I'll catch you over in the next video. All right, now let's move on to installing Kali Linux in our VMware software. Okay, so picking up where we left off, we had just installed VMware Workstation 15 Player, and now we need a VM to actually be able to play with it. So this whole course is going to be based on Kali Linux. If we open up a internet browser here, I've got a few tabs already opened. So what I want you to do is go ahead and go out to Google and just type in Kali, K-A-L-I, Linux download, and leave it here. What we're going to do as well is I want to talk just a quick second about what Kali Linux is. So Kali Linux is a Debian-based Linux OS. So it's based on pen testing tools, and it's made for pen testers. So what it does is it comes preloaded with a bunch of penetration testing tools, a toolkit if you'll call it. And it is just made for people who are looking to do pen testing. So this is provided by Offensive Security. If you come to Kali.org and you look at the About Us, it provides a little bit of information about who the core developers were and some of the moderators. But basically what it is it followed up a tool called, or a distribution called Backtrack. So the new tool is Kali Linux. Now there are alternatives out there. One of the alternatives right now is called Parrot. So if you go to parrotsec.org and you look into what is Parrot, you can see that they have different distributions and they talk about why Parrot's different, but they do have a pen test distribution here. So for this course, we're going to be using Kali Linux, but I always do like to introduce the alternatives. Kali Linux is probably more popular at this point. Parrot OS is kind of on the newer side. Some people are starting to get behind it and liking it, but I would say Kali still dominates. The third option is that you set up your own distribution. So you have an OS that you like, and then you install the tools on the OS that you like, and you have your own custom build. So some people feel like, Kali and even Parrot, they come with a bunch of tools that they'll never need. So their system's bloated, and they really just have a set amount of tools that they like. And if there's a tool that they want to add into the system, then they'll download that on their own. They don't want to have a ton of bloatware coming with their system. But with my experience in the industry, mostly everybody that I've worked with is using Kali Linux. Some people are doing their own builds, especially on like the web app pen testing side. And then now Parrot is kind of that up and coming OS that some people are transitioning to. but it is predominantly Kali Linux. So that is why we're doing this course in Kali Linux, and I feel like it's the best option for us to learn some basic Linux skills and learn it in the OS that is the most dominant in the industry right now. So let's go ahead and go back to that Kali Linux download. And while this link has been clicked on, do not let it fool you. We're actually not clicking on the official Kali Linux downloads page. We're going to scroll down a little bit. I want to go to the Kali Linux custom image downloads page, and I'll show you why here. So this is that offensive-security.com. Make sure that's the one you're following along with. And if you scroll down just a bit, you see that they're providing us VMware images and VirtualBox images. So remember when I told you that VirtualBox was an option? If you chose that option, here you go, right here, you'll click on this tab and you will download the VirtualBox image. Now, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be running Kali Linux VMware 64-bit, and we're going to download this 7-zip right here. You also have the option to download a torrent if you'd like. The file size is going to be 2.4 gigs, so it might take you a minute depending on your speed of your internet. And they also provide a SHA-256 sum if you want to check the file when you download it. So I'm going to go ahead and just hit download on this, and I'm going to save it. And I will come back as soon as this file is finished downloading. Okay, so my file has finished downloading. I'm going to navigate to the folder where it has downloaded to, which is the downloads folder. And you can see here that it is a 7-zip file. So my installation by default does not have 7-zip. If you do not have 7-zip either, we can go ahead and download that together. So if you go out to Google and you just type in 7-zip, the first thing that comes up is 7-zip.org. You'll see a download tab here. Just go ahead and click on that link and go ahead and download the executable for your respective operating system. So for me, I'm going to be downloading the 64-bit Windows version here. And I'm going to hit save. I'm going to hit run. Say yes. I'm going to go ahead and install to the default directory. Okay, now that it's installed, let's go back to our folder. And let's select that we open with 7-zip here. Okay, now let's see if we can drag and drop. We can, so all I'm doing is dragging and dropping. I'm putting it in the downloads folder. You don't have to do that. You can drag it and put it in a location that you would prefer. This is going to extract, I believe, at a larger file size than just the 2.5 gigs that we downloaded, the 2.4 gigs. So make sure that you have file space where you're going to put this. So I'm going to go ahead and let this finish, and then I will be right back. Okay, so I've successfully unzipped this file. And just for the record, if we hover over it, you can see that it actually extracted to be 10.4 gigabytes. So let's make sure that wherever you extract it to, you have the 10.4 gigabytes in order to successfully complete the extraction. So from here, let's go ahead and open up our VMware player. And we're going to go to player. Up in the left-hand corner, we're going to select file. And then we're going to select open. And then we're going to go to downloads, and we're going to go into our Kali Linux folder here, or wherever you put it if you didn't put it in the downloads folder. And then just select the one item that should be here. It's a little 4 kilobyte file. And what this does for us is it automatically has a build that's just ready to go. So this is really awesome. We don't have to download the image itself and then install it and then pick all the features. No, this is just ready to go for us. So we can also come down here and select Edit Virtual Machine Settings. And there are a couple features here. So depending on the amount of memory that you have on your machine. So right now this is sitting at 2 gigs of RAM. That's fine. If you want it to run faster, I recommend going somewhere between 4 and 8. Obviously, the more RAM you give it, the better it's going to perform. But if you're running on 8 gigs of RAM for your machine, really not going to do well for you. My recommendation is no more than a fourth. So if you're running on 16, then maybe give this 4. You could really try pushing it up to 8. But I am running on 32 right now, so I could crank this up to 8 by my rule here. But just for working with you and following along, I'm going to set this to 2, and then we're going to perform in 2. That way that we are working at the same speeds across the board. Another thing that we need to note is the network adapter. By default, it's set to NAT. We're going to go ahead and just leave it at NAT here. Yours may come set to bridged. If for some reason it's set to bridged, you can try that, but my default preference is NAT. So let's go ahead and just hit OK. Okay, and now we're just going to hit play virtual machine. And a little side note, I am actually now on my OS. I'm running on my my Windows OS as opposed to just running inside the VM. If I was running a VM inside of a VM, I would have a lot of issues, degradation, etc. So now I've actually moved out of the VM and have this running in player on my Windows OS. Okay, and then when we get this pop-up here, go ahead and just say I copied it. And this will start the machine. And you can see the other VMware player back here. It's going to go ahead and directly just start loading up here, and we get to this screen. So we click in, and if we try to just enter in our username and password, our username by default is going to be root. Our password is going to be root backwards, so TOOR, and then hit enter. Now we can make this full screen over here by clicking this button, and we'll enter into full screen mode. We are now successfully logged into our Kali Linux machine. We've installed it successfully, and now we are ready to start learning. So that's it for this video. In the next video, what we're going to be doing is we're going to cover some of the tools and features of Kali Linux, and we'll start talking about what it's capable of, and then we'll dive right into the terminal after that and start learning some command line and some useful tools with Linux. So I will catch you guys in the next video. All right, now let's take a look around Kali Linux and just see what it has to offer us in terms of tools, design, etc. So let's dive right in. Okay, so we're at our desktop here inside of Kali Linux. Now you see the Kali Linux logo, you see there's a couple of things on the desktop. You don't have to worry about these. These are just from VMware themselves put on your desktop. If you install this as an actual OS, this will not be here. So when we talk about navigating around Kali Linux, there's a couple of places that we can look. If we look right away, you can see on the left-hand side over here, we've got a favorites bar. So we've got our folders. So if we click on the folders or our files, we can navigate around. This feels like any other machine, right? We have our documents, downloads, music, pictures. If you're a Windows user or Mac user, whatever, this feels pretty common. So this is a GUI or a graphical user interface way of interacting with the folders. As you move on, and we move on in this course, we're going to be living in the terminal. So the terminal is right here. If you click on the terminal, this is something similar to your command line. So from here, we can actually navigate to all these folders here, and we can put files in there, take files out. Anything that we can do in a graphic point of view, we can also do from this command line point of view as well. So as we learn, we're going to get a little less relying on the graphical interface and more on the terminal side of things. However, do know that there are ways to do a lot of things from a graphical side if you still need that interaction with the machine and you don't want to be completely keyboard oriented. There are also tools on the side over here. If we look, we've got a leaf pad. So leaf pad is just like a notepad, right? Or, just your notebook here. You can take some quick notes, save it out. Should be pretty familiar for you as well. So they've got Firefox. It used to be called Iceweasel, and that's just your web browser. Down here are some of the tools that you may use. Now, Burp Suite is a very popular tool for web application penetration testing. We're not going to be getting into any of these tools at the moment, but I will cover what a couple of them do. So again, Burp Suite's a web application penetration testing tool. If you ever get into web app, or if you even get into some basic pen testing, chances are you're going to start using Burp Suite on a pretty regular basis. Over here is ZenMap. Now, this is the graphical version of a tool called Nmap, and you will be using Nmap pretty religiously when you're doing pen testing. So if you like a visual view of doing scanning, so Nmap is a network mapper. It allows you to scan machines for open ports and for vulnerabilities. So if you want that in a more of a visual type of view, a graphical interface type view, then you have ZenMap as a feature. This little guy down here is Metasploit. Now, Metasploit is a tool that can be taught, all these are tools that can be taught in deep, deep lessons all by themselves. Not to make that intimidating for you at all, just know that that's how robust this is. We're looking at 3 tools right here, and they're all very, very powerful. And this isn't even the half of it or the quarter of what Kali Linux has to offer. So Metasploit, you may have heard of it if you've heard of anything in pen testing. It is a framework that does just a little bit of everything. So a lot of pen testers live and die by this. It's a fantastic tool in my opinion, and you're going to get very, very intimate with it very, very quick if you do move into pen testing. Down here is a tool called Cherry Tree, and that's pretty much where I'm going to stop. We've got Maltego and Kismet. This is wireless based, and this one here is information gathering based. But Cherry Tree is another useful one. If we open that up, this is actually another note keeping tool. Like I showed you LeafPad. LeafPad's just for quick little one-offs. Cherry Tree is more of note keeping as a whole. So you've got nodes that you can add. So you can add a node here and just say you're following along and you want to add notes. You can say Linux, and then you have a node. You can add all of your notes in here. And then you can actually add children nodes as well. So maybe there's a command that you want to add in. So say we're covering commands and you want to write all the commands in about Linux down here. You could do that as well and then save this out. Nice thing too is that you can take screenshots and put them in here, and it exports really nice. And this is going to be very, very useful for anything in your career. But when it comes to pen testing, there are so many tools, so many commands that I think it is incredibly important to be able to take notes. And Cherry Tree is built in already. Personally, I use what used to be in Kali Linux, which is a tool called Keep Note. But Cherry Tree is a great alternative as well. So either of them would work, and it's highly recommended by me that you use some sort of note-keeping tool as you go through your courses and get better as a pen tester. So I'm going to close out of this here. And I want to show you a couple more things. You have a feature here where you can show all of your applications. So if you click on that, it'll bring up all the applications, including the ones that are grouped down here. Another way to do this is if we come up into applications at the top, you can see that everything is grouped really nice for you. So it goes through the steps of penetration testing. And let's say that hey, I'm gathering information on a client. Okay, well, here are some of the built-in tools for information gathering right here. Say you want to do a wireless assessment and you want to do those sorts of attacks. You've got all these wireless tools built in for you right here. Now, chances are you're going to be running these tools from the command line. So again, you don't want to get too hung up on the graphical side of things, as you may not always have access to that either. But it's important to know what tools that you have in front of you. And there are even tools like Wireshark in here. So very, very useful. Pretty much a little bit of everything that you can imagine. So just, take some time and go through the tools. And if you're becoming a pen tester, you're working on it, look at a tool and do some research on it. Say you want to know what this Mac changer is. It might be obvious. It might not be obvious, right? So maybe you go Google what Mac changer does, how to use it, what the syntax is, and then you play around with that. pick a new tool every day, figure out something that you can do with it, how to use it, what it does. But so Kali Linux is a distribution full of useful tools, and for a base OS, it's fantastic. And this is why so many people in the industry just download this, install it, and they're ready to go. We talked about in a previous video how there are other OSs, or there are people out there that like to just do their base install, and you can see that there's bloatware here. If you want to call it that, right? Like there's forensic tools, and maybe you'll never do any forensics in your life, and you don't need all this installed in your system. So if you're a type of person that is, it doesn't want this extra stuff, this extra software on your system, okay, then maybe you do start moving towards that custom build eventually in your career. You say, hey, I want to learn all these things first, and then once I learn what tools I really like, then maybe you move to your own distribution that you create yourself, and you spin that up every time instead of having all these tools built in. But as a base OS, as something that you can learn from and start with, this is why I've chosen Kali, and this is why we're going to learn it today. So let's go ahead. From here, what we're going to do is we're going to dive right into the terminal. So let's just open this terminal, and then we're going to full screen it and move on to the next video. So from here on out, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be living in this terminal. I'm going to back away from the graphical side of things and really just get your hands dirty in the terminal, make you feel comfortable. If you've never used Linux before, this is perfect for you. So I'm going to give you the pen tester perspective on why we're doing a lot of these things. Some of these commands are going to be the same commands regardless if it's on a Kali Linux machine or if it's on another distribution of Linux. So you'll be able to take a lot of these commands and just use Linux in another system as well. So if you're interested in pen testing, if you're interested in Linux, this is where we really get into the meat of the course, and it should get interesting for you. So I will catch you over the next video when we're going to start talking about how to navigate the file system and get comfortable with that. All right, on to navigating the file system. So first, let's talk about some of the commands we're going to learn today. So we're going to learn about pwd, which is present working directory. We're going to learn about cd, which is how we change directories. We're going to learn about ls, which is going to be listing the files in a folder or in a directory. And we're also going to talk about how to find some hidden folders with ls. We'll talk about how to make a directory and to remove a directory. We're going to talk about copying, removing, moving, and locating files. We'll talk about something called updatedb and how that pertains to locating files. We'll talk about the password and how to change our password, and we'll talk about an important command called man. So by the end of this first lesson, you should be pretty comfortable with all of these commands. It may seem a little daunting, but they all kind of play in with each other. Again, please make sure to take notes. You've got Cherry Tree built in. You can also use Keep Note or even just a notepad in front of you. That'll help with the experience, and also maybe watching the video more than once will help with the experience as well. So let's go ahead and dive right into the command line. So now our first lesson in Linux terminology is going to be navigating the file system. So if you're a Windows user, you're used to navigating your file system probably through folders, through a GUI, so a graphical user interface. Well, in Linux, we can do that, but the majority of the time we're going to live in this terminal here. So we really need to know how to get around. So the first thing we can do here is we can say, hey, where are we at? And that's pwd. So that stands for present working directory. So you type that in, you hit enter, and it says, okay, we're in the root folder. So we know that we're in the root folder, but how do we get out of the root folder? We can use a command called cd, and that stands for change directory. So if we want to change directory backwards, we just type in 2 dots here. And now we can say, okay, where are we at? So we're in a slash. So we're just in a home folder here, or just our generic slash folder, right? So what we can do is, well, how do we know? Can we go backwards from here? Let's keep trying. So we do pwd again. No, we can't. This is our base folder, right? So you have to think of this as the lowest you can go. So now how do we move around? How do we know how to go forwards again? Well, we don't know what's in our directories, right? So we're sitting in this slash folder, and how do we look around? So there's a command called ls that lists everything that's in the folder. So if we say ls, we kind of see this color coordinated here. And the color coordination, it just depends on if it's a folder, if the folder's read-write, there's permission settings, which we're going to get into later. But the majority of these here are folders. Okay, well, we know we just came out of root, so we can go back into root. Now, how do we do that? So we can say change directory root, and we can actually hit tab to autocomplete. I don't know if you caught that, but there's no R any folder besides root. So at R, I can just hit tab, and it should type it out for me. Oh, I lied. There is a run in here somewhere, but it's hidden. We're going to cover that soon as well. So RO, hit tab, autocomplete, can change directory into root. So let's ls in root and see what's in here. Okay, this is more like our home folder, right? So we've got desktop, documents, downloads. This is kind of what applies to the root user. So what if we're sitting in this root folder here and we wanted to access instead this Etsy folder? Well, could we do the same Etsy command here? Well, I'm hitting tab and nothing's happening. Well, because Etsy doesn't belong in this area, right? But if we put a / in front of it, because this is the base, and then we hit Etsy there, now we can navigate to the Etsy folder. And we can actually double tab and see what's all in the Etsy folder, like an ls, say no. Another way to do that is if we wanted to ls what's in the Etsy folder without navigating to it, we could just type ls Etsy, and you can see everything that's in here. So there's some tricks that we can do, right? So we don't have to actually navigate to the folder to know what's in there. Again, if we ls and we want to know what's sitting in videos, or even let's say what's sitting in desktop for our folder. Well, if we start typing desktop and hit tab, we can't do that either, because everything in Linux is case sensitive. So if we start typing desktop and then hit tab now, we can ls and see what's in there. So our VMware came with a couple of shell scripts here that are automatically placed on our desktop. If we wanted to confirm that, you can see that they're both right here. So as of right now, we are just sitting in our root home folder, and we know how to navigate around. So if we wanted to go to desktop, we could hit ls now and see what's in there. If we wanted to go backwards, we could. Okay, now we're back in our root folder, and you can also tell where you're at. Your present working directory sits right here, right? So this little tilde is actually your home folder, and you can see that we're in desktop. So if we wanted to go back into our desktop, instead of typing, say you wanted to go to music from your desktop, instead of going root music, which will work, you could also just say, I want to go music. And that'll put you there as well. And notice you don't need the leading / when you use the tilde. So just some couple interesting tricks that you'll kind of pick up along the way. Tab is definitely going to be your best friend. If you run into something with multiple options, say you're trying to CD and you say, I want to go to my desktop, and you're tabbing and it's not working, you can hit double tab, and then it'll show you, okay, well, there's desktop, documents, downloads. Those are your 3 options that start with a D. So now you kind of have an idea as to how to kind of move around, but let's do a little bit more. So what if we want to make our own folder? Well, there's something called make directory, mkdir. So if we say make directory, and we'll say, I'm just going to use my name, Heath. So now if we ls, we can see that this Heath folder is now here. We can go into the Heath folder, and there should be nothing in it, right? So we can go back, and we can also get rid of the Heath folder, remove directory Heath. If we ls again,
it's gone. So now what else can we do? Well, we can also look for hidden folders. So we can say ls-la, and we can look for hidden files and folders here. Remember the color coordination. So this .cache, right? That in theory is a hidden folder. So if we say cd.cache, we can go into there. We ls, and there's actually some information in there. But when you saw it originally, you didn't see that. We're going to cover more on this. I just kind of wanted to show you that trick. As you see over on the left side, there's file permissions and properties. So be aware that just because it looks like something's not there doesn't mean it's not there. It might just actually be hidden, similar to Windows where you have hidden files and folders. So just a quick trick to show you that. So another thing we can do. So let's go back. And don't worry about what I'm doing here. You're going to cover these commands in a little bit. I'm just going to echo hi, and we're going to put that in a test.txt folder. So now if we ls, you can see that test.txt is here. So if we want to actually copy this file, we can copy this file to another location. So we can say, hey, I've got this test.txt, but I actually want to move it to downloads. And if we go ls to downloads, you could see that test.txt is actually sitting in there. And if we wanted to remove it, we can just say remove from downloads, or test.txt. Actually, sorry, remove downloads test.txt. We don't even have to transition into that directory if we don't want to. So another trick, say we want to see now that it's gone, and we want to ls, but we don't want to keep typing this out. If you hit the up arrow, now you can just see your old commands. So if you keep typing a command over and over, you can see what's going on. So ls shows that there's nothing in downloads now. We were able to successfully remove that file. So another thing that we can do is we can actually move. So say we wanted to move test.txt, and we wanted to put that into downloads. Okay, now if we ls, test.txt is now gone from this folder because we've moved it. We haven't made a copy, we've actually physically moved it away. So now if we ls, actually let's just tab up, you can see that test.txt is now in there. And I'm going to remove that here. Okay, and now the last thing I want to show you is the locate feature. So if we wanted to locate a file, say I wanted to locate bash. Let's see. So we're looking for a file, and we're going to get more specific along the way, but if you type in locate, you can kind of look through a system to see if you can find it. Now, I'm looking for, say, any type of bin bash or bin-r bash. That's fine. That's really what I wanted, but it shows you everything with bash in it. Now, this might not work right away. What you might need to do is update the database. So you type in update db, it updates everything for you, and then you can use locate again. So it has to build that database of the information that it's finding in order to locate what you're searching for. So make sure that you use update db sort of frequently. Okay, so two more things I want to show you, and then we'll close out this video and move on to the next one. So an important thing you want to do with your new account is we're using a default password, and that's not very secure. So to change a password for our user, we can just type in passwd, and now it's going to ask us for a new password. So instead of using Tor, we can use something else. I'm going to type in the very secure password as my password for an example here. But if you plan on using this machine for future reference, you can type in a secure password and kind of keep it. So lastly, I wanted to show you is something called man. So man pages. Man pages are your instructions for any command that you're running. Most commands come with a man page. So let's say we want to look at ls. We can say man ls. And then it's going to give us all this information here about ls. So if you see, it says ls is list directory contents. Awesome. And then it gives you what options we can do. Well, we can do a -a for all, which you saw earlier. And you can kind of scroll through here and just see exactly what it has to offer. And that's kind of it. So when you go through here, you can kind of, if you're struggling to, there's a command in there, but you're not sure exactly what the command is, you can type in man and search it. And sometimes you can do ls, I don't know if this is going to work, but -- help. And you get some information as well. It doesn't provide you the full man pages, but it provides you something pretty close. So that's kind of just your way around if you ever get stuck, something to look for. Okay, so that's it for this lesson. Next, we're going to move on to users and privileges, how to add users, and how to change some sudos and some modifications to our file permissions. So until next time, my name is Heath Adams, and I thank you for joining me.
All right, now let's talk about users and their privileges. So what are we going to learn in this lesson? We'll do a quick user privilege overview. From there, we're going to talk about the chmod command, which is the change mode command. That's going to let us change the permissions on a file or directory. We're also going to talk about how we're going to add a user with the add user command. From there, we're going to take a look at a couple of important files. One is the Etsy password file, and the other is the Etsy shadow file. So the Etsy password file is not actually where the passwords are stored on a machine. That is the Etsy shadow file, which stores the hashes, but the Etsy password file does store where what users are on the machine, and you can correlate that to the shadow file. So we'll talk about those in more detail and their importance to pen testing. Very, very important. And then we're going to talk about su, which is the switch user command. And finally, we'll talk about sudo, which is a command that allows you to elevate your privileges on a Linux machine. So let's go ahead and dive right into our lesson.
Okay, so now we're going to cover users and privileges. So in the last video, we touched a little bit on privileges with our ls-la, and we touched a little bit on users by changing the password of our root account. So now we'll cover a few more commands regarding those. So if we look again at ls-la, you could see all this crazy jumbled wordage over here, right? So it actually means something. So we look at the first line here. If we see a dash like this, a hyphen, that means it's a file. If we see a D, that means it's actually a directory. And then you see R, W, and X. So R, W, and X actually means read, write, execute. It's the permission settings that this particular group has. Now there are 3 groups here. There's the first, second, and then your third right here, right? So your first group right here is the owner of the file. So it looks like the owner of the file has full read, write, execution, right? And then the next set of 3 here is actually the permissions for the members of the group that own the file. So this is group ownership as opposed to actual ownership here. So for the people that are in the group that has access to this file, they can only read and execute. They can't write to it. Now, for the last one, this is just all of their users. So any common user here can actually just read and execute. They can't write the document. So that comes into play, especially when we get into penetration testing, because with penetration testing, we're looking to have full access, right? So we're always going to be looking for that folder that has full read-write. Typically, if we look at temp, that's our temp folder a lot of times. You see the temp folder has full read-write execute. So when we're doing penetration testing, we're trying to upload some sort of exploit, we might actually upload it into the temp folder because that's where we can execute those files. However, we could also be looking for other full read-write execute files where we need to modify them and give us root access to a system. So it's all about insecure configurations, and we're going to cover that more once we get into the actual penetration testing part of the course. So for the Linux Essentials part of the course, all we need to worry about is these file permissions. Another important feature of that is if we were to create a script, our script's not going to be able to run until it has full access. So how do we change access here? So let's make a file. I'm just going to make, we'll just echo another text document, right? So we'll just say hello. And actually, I typed that in backwards. So hello, and we'll call it hello.text. So if we ls here, by default, we only have read write and then read access for everybody else. Meaning if we wanted to read it, we could say cat, which we're going to get into later, cat hello.text, and it just says hello. So what can we do here? Well, we can use something called change mode. In changing mode is chmod, and we have a couple options here. So we can do a plus, right? And we could say, well, we want read, write, execute, or we just want execute. But another way I like doing it is you have a number feature. So the one you really need to know is all sevens. Sevens gives you full read-write access across the board. So if we say chmod 777 hello.text, now we ls la. And you notice that hello.text turns green. That means it is full read-write. And here you go. We've got the dash here saying it's a file, and we've got read, write, execute across the board. So this is how we change file permissions. You don't need to necessarily know about the other numbers in terms of penetration testing. It becomes more in terms of configuration and security management of files if you were to get down that path. So to stay on the easiest path, just remember 777 or plus X will work as well. So changing the mode is critical, and we're going to cover it time and time again throughout the course once we get a little bit deeper. So a couple more things we need to talk about. Say we wanted to add a new user. Well, there's a feature called add user. So we say add user, and 1 or 2 names is allowed. So we need to add user, say John. Okay, so it made something for John. Let's give him a password. Give him a password again, and we'll just hit enter for the defaults. It's all correct. Okay, so we now have a username John, and we can confirm that. We can actually cat the etc password file here, and you see down at the very bottom we have this user John. So this etc password file you're going to become very familiar with because it shows you all the users. Now there's a lot of times where you're doing penetration testing, you're going to have access to this etc password file because it doesn't provide the password anymore. It used to a long time ago. Passwords are now in the shadow file, so you actually have a little bit of access and information disclosure here at the hands of poor configuration. So you see that I've created a user John. Well, that gives us a little bit of information. Say there's SSH on a machine or something else, we can use that username of John to try to break into the machine. So we'll cover that again later. But if we wanted to see what the etc shadow file looks like, now we come in here and you've got these jumbled stuff here, right? So it's just a hashing format. So what we're doing is we can actually use a tool like Hashcat to break this down and crack these passwords. Now, a password will be very easy. But just know that if you have access to the etc shadow file, you have a good chance of cracking a password, depending on your capabilities and depending on the strength of the password, that'll allow you access to a machine. So something to think about there. Okay, so now we have our user John. Let's go ahead and switch to him. So we can use something called SU, which stands for switch user, and we'll say switch user John. Okay, so it automatically gave us John here. Let's see if we could switch back to root. Okay, we can't just switch back to root because we need root's password, right? So we can type in password and that works. But if we didn't know the password, then we'd be stuck on John. We were able to access John because we were already root. So this comes into play in terms of users. Let's go back to John here. Now, if you're a user, you have to be able to do certain things. You need permission to do certain things, I should say, right? So root has full access and permission to do everything. But John, we just created John. John doesn't have any sort of access. So if we wanted to change the password, say we want to change the password for root, I can't modify the password information because I don't have that kind of access. Now, there is something called a sudo, which would provide John that access if we gave it to him. So it's called a sudoers file. And basically, anybody in that sudoers file can change permissions given if they are a sudo user, right? So we would type in sudo password root, and it's going to ask for the password for John, but you're going to notice, hey, John's not in the sudoers file. John can't do this. So John has base permissions, right? And we're going to counter that a lot of times in penetration testing, where if we get in, we'll get something called lower privilege, and we'll get an account like John, and we're going to try to escalate into root, but we just can't do it. The chances of doing that and having a John in a sudoers file is just not high. It's possible, but it's not likely. So for now, just know that if you want a user other than root to have access to file permissions, you need to have them in the sudoers file. That becomes useful too in penetration testing because you can look at the sudoers file if you have access to see what users have sudo privileges. Okay, so that is it for this lesson. In the next lesson, we're going to be covering network commands and moving on gradually towards scripting. So let's go ahead and get there, and I will see you when we get over there.
All right, so now we're going to be covering common network commands. So before we dive into the commands we're going to learn, I'm going to go on a tiny bit of a rant here. So if you are not familiar with networking, now is the time to become familiar with networking. There are two things I think that a person needs before they really can dive into pen testing, and that is Linux experience, which you are gaining some Linux experience now because most pen testing is done in Linux. And the other thing is to have a good network foundation. So if you're looking at these commands here, and I say ifconfig, which if you're a Windows user and you hear ipconfig, if you know what that is, okay, that's basically the same thing. If you know what ping is, if you know what ARP is, netstat, route, those should all be pretty familiar where you can guess what those are. If you do not know what these commands are, you might want to brush up on your networking as well, because the better you are at networking, the better you're going to be when it comes to pen testing, because you're going to have to navigate around networks. You're going to have to understand where you are at in a network. You're going to need it for basic troubleshooting as well. So just to understand these commands are going to be very important. But what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be taking common network commands that we're going to be running as a pen tester, and we're just going to apply those to their version in Linux. Some of these may be familiar to you, some may be new to you, but we're talking here ifconfig, which is going to show us some information very similar to ipconfig in Windows, where we'll see our IPv4, IPv6 if we have it information, our MAC address, things along those lines, our subnet mask, etc. The iwconfig is the wireless adapter version of that. Ping is a ping command where we talk over ICMP and we try to communicate to another machine to see if it's alive and responding back to us. And we've got the ARP command, which just maps IP addresses to MAC addresses. And we've got netstat, which is just a command line tool that's going to allow us to display all connections and listening ports. And then finally, we've got route, which displays our routing table. So we'll go ahead and take a little bit of a deep dive into those in this next lesson. And hopefully this is a refresher for you. So again, if not, then you should be looking into some networking studies as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive right in.
Okay, so now let's cover network commands. So the first command I want to cover is ifconfig. So you may be familiar with the Windows version of this, which is ipconfig, and they pretty much do the same thing. So it shows you here your different interface types and the IP address associated with them. So ETH0 here, Ethernet 0, has an IP address of 192.168.132.164. You can see the net mask, the broadcast address, and you can see the MAC address as well. And we also have a loopback address here. Now, if your machine has a wireless adapter, or at some point you want to do wireless penetration testing, you're going to need iwconfig. And you should not expect to see anything on this at the moment unless you're using a laptop. Then you actually might see a configuration down here for it. If you would see something under iwconfig, you would see like a WLAN 1, WLAN 0, something along those lines. Okay, and another common command that we're going to see is going to be the ping command. So we can just type in ping and the address that we're trying to talk to. So for example, I'm going to try to ping my home router, and I get talking back. So if I tried to ping something that wasn't in my network, like a 16.1, you're going to see the results change. So with ping here, ping is going to be endless. Until we hit something like Control-C to stop it, it'll ping forever. So I'm going to hit Control-C again and kind of show you the difference. So you see that we attempted to ping here and we got replies, we got information back. Well, that's good. That means we're talking to the other machine. It says, hey, are you there? It says, yeah, I'm there. And we try to ping this machine here, but this machine's not talking back. It could mean that the machine is not on the network or that the machine is just blocking ICMP traffic. ICMP is another word for ping. So moving on to the next command, I want to show you ARP. So the best way I like to type in is ARP with a switch of A. And ARP is just going to show you MAC addresses that it talks to and the IP address. Actually, I said that backwards. It's going to show you the IP address it talks to and the MAC address associated with it. So if an IP address reaches out, say 192.168.15.1 talked out to this machine, it's going to say, okay, hey, who are you? It's going to send a broadcast message out. It's going to say, who has this IP address? And then the IP address will respond and says, hey, I do, and this is my MAC address. So ARP is just a way of associating IP addresses with MAC addresses. And once you know that, you can also look at netstat. So netstat-ANO is another one of my favorite commands. And this shows you just the active connections that are running on your machine. So if we scroll way up, and you can just kind of see what's open and what's talking here. Where this really comes in handy on a penetration test is to see if a machine is talking to somebody else. Same thing with ARP. You want to know what that machine is associated with, and is it talking to something on a port. So this is more just internal right now, but it's still good to know. So for example, if I were to open up a Firefox page and connect out to the internet, then I went and I did a netstat again, I would see information about that port being open and that I am going out with it. So just kind of keep that in mind. These are not commands that you really need to know in depth right now. Networking does come into play when you are doing penetration testing, but we're going to cover these commands time and time and again. I just wanted to give you a very brief introduction to them. Okay, and the last command that I have for you today is route. So if you type in route, that's going to print your routing table. And the routing table is important because it tells you where your traffic exits, essentially. So for this VM, my traffic is exiting on 192.168.134.0. So any traffic goes out of this 0.0.0.0 gateway in this range, right? So when it goes out this gateway, it's doing NAT, so network address translation, and it's running off my computer. So the best examples aren't here, but it's important to know route as well because there could be a machine that you're attacking that has multiple routes. So you might see a 134 and a 135 because it has a dual home NIC, meaning it has two NICs inside of it. So it's actually talking to a completely different network that you didn't know existed. So you might have been attacking one network in the 134 range, and then 135 is just out there, and this computer can talk to both. And until that point, you had no idea. And that's the idea of called pivoting, when you switch a network from one to the other, but you're using a machine. So that's it for this lesson. In the next lesson, we're going to talk about viewing, creating, and editing files.
Okay, so viewing, creating, and editing files. This section sounds exactly like what it is. We're going to talk about how to view, create, and edit files. Mainly, we're just going to be showing how to create quick text documents, but we'll teach you commands that will allow you to do further in the future, as you will see as we get further in the course and get into scripting. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of the commands that we're going to be learning. So some of the commands that we're going to learn. We're going to learn the echo command, which echoes what we write right back out to the terminal. We're going to look at the cat command, which is going to print out a document for us. It's similar to type in Windows. We'll talk about replacing versus appending and which function does which and how to do it. We're going to talk about the touch command, which can be used to create a file on the fly. We'll talk about nano, which is a text editor that's built into the terminal. And then we're going to talk about gedit, which is also a text editor, but it is a GUI text editor. So we do get a little bit of GUI in this lesson. So let's go ahead and dive right in.
Okay, so this is my second time recording this video. The first time I forgot to turn my microphone on and performed for my cat. So she approved of it. Let's see if you approve of it the second time around now that I have a little bit of practice. So what we're going to be talking today is we're going to be talking about viewing, creating, and editing files. So I've already showed you the echo command. If you recall, we used echo to create a file, right? We created a hello.txt. And we can just echo hello out to the terminal. We could say echo hello, and it'll say hello back. So what we can do with echo is we can use it to write to a file. So if we were to say echo hey, and then we write it to hey.txt, well, we can look and see that hey.txt is here. And you can see my files from the previous one, so I'm trying to come up with more ways of saying hello. But we're going to use hey.txt here. So if we cat hey.txt, all cat does is print out to the screen what is in a file. It says hey. Okay, so let's say we want to append cat, or we want to append hey.txt. Well, we can tab up here. What if we just say hey again? And we've got this greater than symbol here, and we're just putting it into the hey.txt file. Well, that didn't work. We didn't append it. We actually overwrote it. So what can we use to actually append this here? What we can do is we could say hey again, right? Just to give us something different. And we can add a second greater than symbol here. So now if we cat the file, you can see that we actually appended to the end of it. So this becomes incredibly useful when we are either adding stuff to a list, say we're gathering IP addresses and we just want to combine our lists, or when we're creating a series of commands and we're going to use those commands to send all at once. We're going to cover that later when we talk about file transfers in the penetration testing section, where we use a set of commands like this on a Windows machine to actually transfer files via FTP. It's just so much easier than typing them all in one by one. We can create a little document and run the document. So this becomes useful when we have a series of commands, and for other reasons as well, as you'll learn as you go on in your Linux career. So we've talked about echo and we've talked about cat. So let's talk about some other ways to create a file. We can use something called touch and to say new file.txt. And if we ls, you could see that new file.txt is here. But if we cat new file, there's nothing in there because we haven't put anything in there yet. So there's a few things that we can do. We could use echo and append the file, right? We could also use a tool called nano. Now nano is a terminal text editor. There are other terminal text editors like Vi and Vim. I don't prefer those personally. I like Nano the most. Some people have their preferences. So I encourage you to play around with any of them as you wish. Vi and Vim are the other two. But for this course, we're going to be using Nano. So if I say nano new file.txt, I could type whatever I want in here. And we're going to be using Nano a lot to create scripts, to create Python scripts, and to edit shellcode as we get into a little bit of exploit development. So I'm going to hit Control X, I'm going to hit Y for saving, and then we'll save it to new file.txt. If we cat this, now it says, hey, I could type whatever I want in here. So that's one way of editing it. Another way of editing it is using a graphical interface. So we can use gedit and say new file. And if you don't like using a terminal, you're more than welcome to use gedit here. Just type in new line here and save it. And I like using gedit. It's a lot cleaner because I can, highlight and delete. I don't have to use my keyboard to navigate around like I do in the terminal. So if you have the option to use gedit, for sure, but sometimes you're going to be on another machine that's not your own or is headless and doesn't have a GUI, that you're going to have to use Nano. So get comfortable using both. So we save this. Let's go ahead and cat it out and see what happens. Okay, you can see that the new line is in there. So really that's the overview that I wanted to cover. So just know that you can create files pretty much using Echo, Touch, and actually you can create files using Nano as well. If you say Nano, this is new.txt, I'll just say hello, Control X, save it. If you ls, you can see this is new.txt is right here. So you can use all of these tools in different ways to create files. It's completely up to you how you want to do it. Personally, when I'm creating a file, I use Nano and I just create a new shell script, Python script, text document that way. You could also do it using gedit as well. So just know that we're going to be using these a lot and try to get comfortable with these. And from here, we're going to be moving into controlling Kali services. So we're just going to briefly talk about what services you need running on boot and how to do that.
All right, in this video, we're going to be talking about starting and stopping Kali services. Let's go ahead and just take a quick look at the commands we're going to learn. So not a lot of commands in this video, only two. We're going to talk about the service command and the systemctl command. So the service command deals with services. It's going to allow us to start and stop services on the fly. And the systemctl command is going to allow us to enable or disable services so that they load up on boot or do not load up on boot. So let's talk a little bit more about services and look at how these commands can be useful for pen testing. All right, so let's talk about starting and stopping services. So when we're in Kali, there are a couple different ways that we can start and stop services. And when I talk about a service, I'm talking about something like a web server or SSH or maybe a SQL database. So when we cover this video today, I'm going to show you a few different services and how to start them and stop them. I'll show you how to start them permanently on boot, and we'll talk about which services are important to keep on boot, which services are important to just start when you feel like that, just starting them or when you need them, etc. So let's start with our first service, which is going to be Apache 2. Now, Apache 2 is a web server. So let's go ahead and do a proof of concept first. Let's start with a command that we learned in an earlier video, which is ifconfig. I'm going to grab our IPv4 address right here, and I just want to copy this. I want to go out to a web browser over here, and we're just going to paste this address. Now you'll notice that it says it's unable to connect. This is expected here. We're not running a web server. Now let's go back in here and let's just say service Apache 2 start. Okay, looks like it went through. Let's go ahead and hit enter again. And now you can see that Apache 2 Debian default page has been loaded. So what has changed? Well, When we boot our machine, this Apache 2 service is not running by default. So if we want to run a web page, then we actually have to start up the service for it to work, as you just saw here. Now you can see that if we want to add files or replace files here, well, we're going to have to edit the var www HTML folder. So if we come out here and we go into other locations, computer, and then we go into our var www HTML, you'll see that the index.html page is here. So if we actually wanted to maybe host a malicious web page and have it point back to us, this is one way we might do it right here. If we want to serve up some files, say we have something that we want to upload to a machine that might be malicious, or a file that we want to transfer to somebody else or download on another computer. It doesn't have to be malicious. We could host that file in this folder here. Now that is fine. This is one way to do it, right? You could put your files all in one location. But it's not my favorite way. It was my favorite way when I first got started. There is a much easier way now, and I will show you how to do that. So let's go ahead and type ls. You'll see we have no documents here. So I'm just going to echo hello into hello.txt and then have that hello.txt here. Now what we can actually do is we can spin up a web server. So we can just say python -m for module and say simple HTTP server. You can auto tab it and then say 80 for the port. Oh, 80 is already in use, so let's just give it 8080. 80 is in use from the Apache server at the moment. So instead, let's look at what happens. So let's just call it out at 8080. And you can see here that I can go to this hello.txt and actually get the file. I have information in real time whether or not that file was captured. And overall, this is just a web server that's so easy to spin up. I can put it in the directory that I want it to. So if I wanted to serve my desktop folder, I would navigate to desktop and then spin this Python module up. I don't have to put everything into a var www folder, and it just makes life really, really simple. So just proof of concept, we can do a service Apache 2 stop, and we can come back and make sure that that web server has been stopped by going here and refreshing. Now you can see that it's gone. We can cd into something like downloads. We say ls. There's nothing in here. So we can tab up a couple times and just serve up port 80 now, because you can see it's not in use anymore. And come back here, refresh. You can see there's nothing in the directory listing because there's nothing in the folder. So this is just an easy way to spin up a web server. I think it's much easier than Apache 2. I'm showing you both because I like to give alternatives, but using Python moving forward is a great, great feature. My challenge to you is to look up how to spin up a FTP server with Python. So I won't get redundant here. I do have future lessons and other courses that talk about this, but if you want to challenge yourself to figure out how to spin up an FTP server, that's my challenge to you. There's a module out there that you can download quite easily and spin up your own FTP server. So let's go ahead and Control-C, and we're going to close out of this. And now let's talk about spinning up a service permanently. So let's say that we just had the Apache 2 running and then we rebooted the machine. When we reboot our machine, Apache 2 is not going to be online because we're only doing a service start. It only holds during this session. Once we reboot, that session is gone, that service is gone. So if we want to keep something online the entire time, what we can do is use systemctl. So we can say systemctl enable or disable if you want to disable something. And for example, we could say SSH. Now I'm not going to hit enter here. This is just an example. But let's say that we wanted to have an SSH available on our machine so we can SSH into it. We are opening up SSH for this feature here. Okay, let's say that we want to have a server, and this is one that I do want you to hit enter in. This is going to be a database, right? This is a PostgreSQL. So we're going to say systemctl enable PostgreSQL. And we have enabled that. So now when we reboot, this PostgreSQL will load every single time. Now, why is this important? Well, this is important because it's going to allow us to run Metasploit and have the PostgreSQL database running when we boot. So it doesn't have to take the extra time to load it. If we come over here and we just click on the Metasploit framework, now PostgreSQL is working and it says database already started. So it's already configured. It's going to skip initialization and it's going to go ahead and get right into it. So it just saves us a little bit of time. Metasploit can take some time to run. And I think that if you continue on, if you continue on with being a pen tester, you're definitely going to be using Metasploit quite a bit. So this is just one feature that if you're going to be using it, it doesn't hurt to have it enabled on your system boot. Now, if you feel that you want to have Apache 2 on boot, you can go ahead and do the same thing with the system CTL enable. But the only one that I recommend putting on is this systemctl PostgreSQL. Okay, so that is it for this video. In the next video, we're going to be talking about installing, how to install things from GitHub and how to install using apt-get. So let's go ahead and move right into that video. All right, welcome to the penultimate video. We are going to be focusing on installing and updating tools. So let's look at our agenda. So what are we going to learn? We're going to learn how to install updates for Kali. So we're going to learn how to install updates using a tool called apt-get. And we're also going to learn how to install tools using apt-get. Specifically, we're going to be installing a tool today called Git. We're going to be using Git then to clone from a website. So sometimes when we have a tool that we want, it's not always in apt-get. It's not in the repository. So we're going to actually have to use GitHub and maybe use a tool called Git to download tools or other items from GitHub. But this is just going to be one example, but it's a very, very common example that you may have to do as a pen tester. So let's dive in and take a look at how we can use these commands to install tools and update tools. Okay, so one of the important things you need to know is how to not only install files on your computer, but also how to install updates on your computer. So for Kali, since it's a Debian base, we're going to use something called apt-get. And the first thing I'm going to show you is how to install updates. So the common way to do this, if you don't use the GUI and you want to use the terminal, is apt-get update, and then we'll do and apt-get upgrade. Let's go ahead and just hit enter on this. And let's explain what it's doing. So the first command here is saying apt-get update. So what we're doing is we're looking through packages. Now these packages are predefined, they're repositories. And what it does is it says, okay, I'm going to check packages here for updates. And it went through, looks like they use archive Linux Duke.edu. They checked these packages here and they update the packages. And then once they update the packages, they run this command. So basically the and command is you're going to do something as well, right? So first we're going to update and then we're going to upgrade. So based on what's in these packages, it's going to say, okay, well, we know the following packages were automatically installed and no longer required. So all these things right here, they're going to be removed. And then the following packages have been kept back. Okay, they're fine. They're not going to uninstall those. And then we have the following packages that are going to be upgraded. Okay, so it's a long list that needs updating. And then you come in here and you say, okay, well, it needs 252 megabytes of additional disk space to continue. You could hit enter for yes, and it'll automatically start upgrading. So if you want to update your machine to its newest and best form, you can go ahead and do that. I'm going to go ahead and just hit no on this guy. Okay, and now it's also important to know how to install files. So I'm going to show you two different ways. One way is through apt-get, similar to what we just did, and the other way is going to be through Git itself. So let's go ahead and install Git. We're going to use apt-get to install Git. So it'll look something like this. We'll just say apt-get install Git. And we'll hit yes on this.
And another way to do this is to add a -y at the end of this. So you'd say apt-get install git-y, and that'll automatically say yes if you just want to accept whatever's coming out for you. You go ahead and just hit yes on that, and it may take a minute for these to install. While this is installing, let's go ahead and talk about what Git does. So Git works with GitHub. So when we talk about GitHub, we're talking about a lot of people update their projects, their code, their frameworks onto GitHub, especially in the penetration testing / hacking community. It's often that you're going to find some cool tools that are out there that aren't installed on Kali Linux, can't be found through apt-get, and you have to actually download them from GitHub. So it's very important to know how to use Git, and it's very, very simple. So when we're on a page like this is Veil Framework. It's a very popular tool in penetration testing and malware analysis as well. So say we wanted to install this. Well, there's a couple things we could do. The first thing we could do is always read the directions and see what they recommend. There is a quick install here. And if you look, they have a apt install Veil here with the -y. So that will work. Or you can use git install, where you have to install Git first. Okay, and then we do a git clone, and we run the configuration setup. So that's what we're going to do here. We're going to install Veil just for the fun of it, just so you can kind of get used to how to use GitHub, how to use Git, and go from there. So let's go ahead and just Alt-Tab back over. Looks like we have it. We can check it by typing Git and hitting Tab. Okay, so Git is here. And we're just going to hit space. We know the command is clone. And while it provides it for us down here, it says, hey, git clone, copy this. The other place you can do it is right here where it says clone or download. You just copy this bad boy right here. We'll Alt-Tab back over to our terminal and just hit paste. Okay, and this is going to install in the directory that you choose. So I just put it in this root folder here, and actually our home folder, I should say, and it's installed right here. The folder is Veil right here. Typically, when I install things, I like to put them in the opt folder. So here, cd opt. But since I went ahead and downloaded it here, let's just go ahead for an example purpose. If you do want to install to opt, you're more than welcome. You can move the folder there as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to cd into Veil. And then we'll hit ls. Now, remember, there were instructions. So let's go ahead and look at what those instructions were. The instructions said you're going to run ./config setup.sh force silent. So let's go ahead and just copy this guy. We'll come back in here and we'll hit paste. And it's just going to run out of this config folder, setup.sh. And now it's installing. So we could have easily installed this with apt-get, which if you look what it's doing. It's actually rolling through the packages here, and it's updating the repositories, right? These packages, and then it's going to go ahead and download what it needs. So it's running apt-get anyway. If you see updating apt, it's installing the dependencies. So the easier way, the quick way, which it suggested, was to do it through there, and it's right. They don't always have the installed packages in apt-get, so that's why I wanted to show you the GitHub version of it. So you can go ahead and let this install. Let's just go ahead and recap quickly what we just did. So we used apt-get update and upgrade to install updates in our system. We used git clone to be able to download packages and clone packages off of GitHub. And we used apt-get to be able to download Git itself. So that's really it for this lesson. What I do encourage you to do is go through the man pages of Git and go through the man pages of apt-get, because you're also able to remove programs, update specific programs, etc. So this lesson really just wanted to introduce you to the basics of downloading and updating for your system. I encourage you to learn how to remove files as well as a little bit of homework for yourself. So thank you for joining me, and I will catch you over in the next lesson.
All right, welcome to the last lesson video. So in this video, we are going to be scripting with Bash. Now, this may seem a little overwhelming at first. What we're going to be doing is building out a ping sweeper script. It's going to be pretty basic. And what I want you to do is maybe just watch this video once, and then the second time through, really try to follow along with it, take notes, etc. I think a first time watch through, just to get the concepts, understand what I'm doing, and then the second time really get hands on with it. And I think that'll be probably the best way to learn. But if you have a different learning style, please do go ahead and try that as well. The only thing I can say is don't let this intimidate you. Hopefully by the time the video is over with, you will have a pretty good understanding on basic scripting and how scripting can really be beneficial and improve our timing, improve automation, etc. So let's go ahead and quickly talk about some of the things you're going to be learning in this video. Okay, so some of the commands and items we're going to learn. We're going to talk about grep, which is going to allow us to narrow down some results. We're also going to talk about cut and tr. Both of those are also going to help us narrow down some results. So basically, we're going to start with a ping that we're going to send out, and we're going to want to gather information back that says that ping was valid. So we want to know any computer that responded to us. Well, how are we going to do that? Well, we need to identify what a valid ping looks like. We're going to use grep to kind of narrow down a string or a sentence or something that identifies with a positive ping. And then we're going to cut out everything we don't want and use tr as well to cut some things out that we don't want. So we're going to put this into a script when it's all said and done. And we're also going to be talking about the usage of for loops and their importance, not only with using them in this script, but how we can use simple one-liners to do everyday things for us. So I'll show you at the end of the video how we're going to use like a nmap and use a for loop with nmap to run through an nmap script. So stay tuned through the video. Again, if you are a hands-on learner, maybe first time through you try hands-on, but my recommendation here is to just sit back, watch the video, understand what's going on. Second time, really follow along with it, take notes, and get the most that you can out of this lesson. So let's go ahead and get started.
All right, so now we're going to be covering bash scripting. So the first thing we're going to need to cover before we get into writing our scripts is how to narrow down results. And when we say narrowing down results, what we're saying is if we're given a block of text and we want to extract some information from that block of text, how are we going to do that? So that's what we're going to cover in this lesson. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. What we're going to be doing today is narrowing down a ping result. So if we come into here and we need to ping an IP address within our system. So I'm going to be pinging 192.168.1.90. And you're going to see that it returns a 64 bytes from that address. So it looks like we're getting a response. I'm going to hit Control C here. So if you remember from the networking section, we actually get a response unlimited until we cancel it, right? Like we just Controlled C here from ping. So there's another thing that we can do if we only want to send one packet and see if it's alive or not. We can do a -C of 1. So we're just going to do that. So that's a count of 1. We're sending one packet over. If we set 10, it would send 10 packets over, if that makes sense. So now what we're going to do is we're going to put this into a text file. So if you remember from previous video, we just use this little caret here, and I'm going to call this ip.text. Okay, and if we cat ip.text, you'll see the same results there. So now what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to narrow this down. What do I want to extract from here? Well, I want to extract this IP address. And it'll make more sense when we get into the scripting part. But what we're going to do is we're going to get out specifically of this IP address from this line. Now, what we're interested in actually is a returned IP address that has a valid response, right? So if I were to enter in here, say 15.90, Okay, there's no response there. So this is kind of what it looks like when it doesn't get a response back. It just kind of lingers. And then we hit Control C and it says 0 ping statistics, right? Nothing was received back. So what we see when we get a response back is we see 64 bytes. When there's no response back, we don't have any bytes. So if we're doing a sweep through a network, which we're going to be doing later, we need to be able to narrow down these results. So if we're sending, say, 192.168.1.1 all the way through 255, and we want to see who responds back and then take that list and narrow it down to the IP addresses, which is exactly what we're going to be doing, we need to know how to narrow that down. So what we're going to be narrowing down on specifically is the 64 bytes. So let's tab up a couple times to this cat IP address, and we're going to do a pipe. And the pipe just means we're going to add an additional command here. So the additional command we're going to do is called grep. Grep is going to grab any line with what you specify. So let's specify 64 bytes and see what happens. See, now if you noticed, we had all of these lines before. And now what grep is doing is grep is taking only the lines that contain 64 bytes. So again, a valid response. So we have 64 bytes here, and we have achieved a response. So what we're going to do now is we're going to narrow this down some more. Okay, we've got this line here, but again, we're still trying to extract this IP address. So how can we do that? Well, there is a tool called cut. So if we tab up again, and we do another pipe because we're sending a new command, we're going to say cut. And cut syntax looks like this, and I'll explain it once I type it out here. Okay, so we have cut, and then this -D, that's a delimiter. So the delimiter is what we're going to be cutting on. So we're giving a delimiter of a space, meaning here's a space, here's a space, here's a space. So we're going to be cutting on these spaces. And then we give a field. We say, okay, what field do we want to retrieve back from this cut? Okay, we want field 4. If you look, 1, 2, 3, 4, and the fourth field is our IP address. So it's going to say, okay, I'm going to cut on this space, I'm going to cut on this space, I'm going to cut on this space, and then I'm going to take it right here. Now, if we identified field 5, we would be taking this. If we identified field 3, we'd be taking from. So let's go ahead and just hit enter and see what that looks like. Okay, so now we are narrowed down even more. But there's an issue here. If we were to try to send this IP address, we would have this little colon here attached onto it, and you can't ping with that IP address. So if we're going to be doing a sweep or narrowing down this list, then we're going to actually need to remove this guy here. So let's take a look at how we do that. So if we tab up again, and again, we're going to add a pipe. Now we're going to use a command called tr. And tr just means translate. And what we're going to be doing is another delimiter, so -D there, and we're going to be taking out that colon. So it should look something like this. And if we hit enter, now you can see that that colon has been removed. Okay, now let's talk about how we can use this information to write out a script. We're going to start with a basic script, and we can add upon it as we go. So I've gone ahead and written out a script, but we're going to talk about it very slowly so you can actually look at it and copy it down. So what we're going to do is go ahead and say gedit, and I called this ipsweep.sh. So go ahead and do the same or something similar and hit enter. So let's take a look at this script. So at the very top here, we have to declare what we're doing. So we're going to give a hash bang, and we do this with any scripting language. So if this were Python, we'd be entering Python here, but this is bash. So we're going to be doing a /bin/bash that declares that we're running a bash script. And the .sh also indicates that we're running a bash script. So I want you to ignore this line here and this line here for now. Let's talk about this line. This should look very, very familiar. So what we're doing in this line, we are saying we're going to ping with a count of 1, which we talked about. And then we're going to do something here. We've got a $1 and a $IP. Let's just ignore that for now. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and do the rest that should look familiar. We're going to say we're going to grep 64 bytes. We're going to cut the delimiter of a space, field of 4, and then we're going to do a translate, right, and take off that little bit at the end. Okay, I added an ampersand here at the end. So an ampersand allows us to do threading. So that's exactly why it's in there. If we didn't, we'd have to let the process go one IP at a time. And we'll talk about that in a second as well. So let's talk about this for line. So a for loop is what we're actually running here. And the loop is saying, I want to do an IP address. We're just declaring a variable here. You can call it whatever you want. Where we're saying, hey, for this IP in a sequence of 1 through 254, we're going to do something. And that do is a ping. So what this means is for IP, and if we think about it in sequence 1 through 254, what it's saying is 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up to 254. Okay, so think about it this way. If we say for 1 in this ping sweep, we're going to do that, right? So we're going to say for 1, for 2, for 3, all the way through 254. That's what this loop is doing. So it's a very, very simple loop. Now, IP is replaced down here at the very end. Now we're also calling out this $1. Now this $1 is user input. So we're going to actually do something. This is called IP sweep, right? So we're going to have to call out this IP sweep, something like this, .sh, and then we're going to have to give out some information. It's going to request information. If we don't provide it, it won't know how to ping. So what we're going to do is we're going to say the first 3 octets of our home network. So if yours is 192.168.1, like mine is, then you just enter 192.168.1. Now, we could also, for simplicity, just hard code this. So we can say 192.168.1.IP address. And it would be fine. We don't have to build this in. The only reason we're not hard coding it is because you can do multiple ping sweeps. This can be a ping sweep script for you in the future if you're on a different network or you just want to write something out really quick. $1 works perfect. But if you want to leave it hard coded like this, it'll also work. So let's go ahead and just delete this out. I'm going to put this into $1 again to have a proof of concept. And then we are going to run this. So all we do here at the end is declare done. If we didn't run this with an ampersand here, we would have to add a semicolon similar to this. But because we are having an ampersand, we can actually get rid of that and just put that back, just for some syntax clarity here. Okay, so let's go ahead and save this. And remember from our lesson, we're going to have to change the mode of our script because it's not executable by default. So we're going to do a +X here, and then we're going to call out ipsweep.sh. We can ls and make sure it's green. Here's ipsweep.sh. And then we'll do a ./ipsweep.sh. And I'm not going to enter anything in. I just want to show a proof of concept. So see, it ran through every single number here in threading, and name or service not known because we didn't provide an IP address. So what we can do here is we need to provide that IP address, 168.1, hit enter. Okay, and it pulls back some information. So what we can do with this information, let's write this out to a file. So let's just call this iplist.txt, something like this. Okay, it's done. Now let's just cat out the iplist.txt. Okay, now we have an IP list of the IPs in our network that we just swept, right? And we can use this information later on. But before we go into that, I do want to go back and just improve our script a very, very tiny bit. So let's go ahead and just tab up a couple times till we get to our gedit. And let me show you how we can improve this script. It doesn't have to be overly complicated. What we can do is we can say something like this. We can come in here and give an if statement. So an if is conditional, right? We're going to say if this exists, then do something. And if it doesn't exist, do something else. So we're going to say if $1 is equal to nothing. We're just going to give blank space here. And then we're going to say, then we want to do something. So what are we going to do? We can echo out something similar to you forgot an IP address. and then echo out what you need to do, like syntax /ping sweep, or IP sweep is what we call this, IP sweep.sh, and then IP. Or we can even write it out an example, right? Like something like that. So that way our user, if they're using it, we wrote this for somebody else, they know what we're talking about. And at the very end, we just need to write if backwards, we'll put a FI. So what this is saying is if this is not, then echo here, right? We're going to echo these. And then we need to add one other thing here, which is an else. Let's go ahead and hit enter just to space this out a little bit. So if we have no $1 declared, right? If we have nothing entered in, we're going to say echo you forgot an IP address and syntax here. If we do have something in $1, okay, we're going to do something else. We're going to do our ping sweep. And that's it. So this is very similar and modified from Georgia Weidman's that I've got a long time ago. So full credit goes to her for this little script. It was very, very easy to learn, and it's also very easy to teach. So let's go ahead and just run this one more time. We're going to say IP sweep.sh. And look what happens. Now it says you forgot an IP address. Now we can declare a number in there or anything, and the script's not perfect, right? We're expecting 3 octets, and we could give it a 1, and it's still going to do something like that, which isn't correct, right? So we need to be able to modify this down more, but that gets really advanced scripting into declaring that it needs to be 3 octets, and if you don't provide those, then what? And that just gets more advanced. So we really just need to know, hey, what we're doing here, very basic script for ourselves and something to remember. Okay, so let's clear our screen. Last thing I want to show you. So we've been able to write a script out, but we can also do looping in one line. And this is where it becomes kind of fun. So we have this IP list, right? We did a cat IP list.text. Now let's say we've got this IP list together and we want to do an nmap scan on all of these IPs. Now we could just say nmap and type in the syntax you want and the IP address of it. For every single one of these, start a new tab and let that happen. Or you could do something in a for loop. So we can write the same for loop that we did before. We're going to say for IP. And then what we're going to do is we're going to write a $, and we're going to cat the IP list.text. So all it does is it's bringing out this list that we have here, and it's saying, okay, for this IP, this IP, this IP, etc. We're going to run through all of these. That's what the loop does, right? Okay, we're going to do our semicolon, and then we're going to tell it to do something, right? So what do we want to do? Okay, let's run an nmap script. So we're going to say do nmap, and we'll ping, or we'll do a port 80 on all of these, and we'll say stealth scan that on port 80, and we'll do T4 for a speed, and that should be it. So then we can do done like this and let it run through one at a time. We can also do the ampersand and let it run multiples like this. We can hit enter and see what that does, but I also forgot one thing here. Forgot to declare the IP address. So let's talk about it real quick. So we've got a very, very simple one-liner, and you're going to see one-liners a lot if you get into ethical hacking, and just allows us to do things quickly and scripted. So we got for IP address in this list. So every IP in this list, we're going to loop through. When we do that loop, we're going to do nmap. We're going to do a quick stealth scan of port 80, T4, and we're going to say declare the IP address. If you're not comfortable with nmap, that's okay. This is purely an example and something you will see in your career. I will make a scripting video at some point for nmap, and we'll cover nmap more in detail. So let's go ahead and just hit enter. Okay, I messed up my syntax. So what is going on? Okay, so for IP in, this got deleted. For IP in cat IP list. Let's try this one more time. Okay. So we just did all these scans, 7 scans at once. And what we did is, you see, these are the processes that are starting. So it started up 8 processes, actually not 7. And it's just running through this list, doing the scans. And we're going to go ahead and just kind of look at it. So it says Okay, on 1.74 is 80 open, it's open. Okay, and then on 254 is 80 open, it's open. And then you see filter down here where it's not running, filtered, filtered, same thing. So we can hit Control C or hit Enter if we're done. And that's pretty much it. So what we just did is we ran 8 Nmap scans at one time instead of having to copy and paste these. So that's just a little bit of what scripting can do. It does get more advanced, but to be able to know a one-line for loop is really, really important if you go into penetration testing. And it's just important in basic bash scripting as well. So that's really it for this lesson, and that's really it for this course. So I hope you really learned something from this course. If you did find it valuable, please do share it with others. Please subscribe if you haven't. Please do like the video. Word of mouth is the best thing for me. It helps me grow my channel and helps me give content back to you as I get more feedback and I grow as a channel. So I'm looking to do more courses in the future and appreciate you taking time with me. And if you like this course and you want to chat with me, check the descriptions down below. I've got a Discord channel. We've got quite a few people in there. And I've also got a Twitter if you want to hit me up there. Lastly, I do have a Patreon if you felt like this course is valuable and you would like to support me. Any dollar amount goes a long way for me. Recording equipment, recording software, all of that's very expensive. And the time spent on this is also very detailed, long hours. So if you want to support me or anything, a like, subscribe, etc. goes a long way. I appreciate you taking the time to watch this course. And until the next one, thank you so much for joining me.
All right, and now some bonus material. So I'm adding in some additional resources. These are for those of you that want to continue on. You've learned the Linux now, and you're like, hey, I really want to be a pen tester. I think this is for me. I'm going to provide you a whole lot of different resources here, so take notes. These are some of the best resources I could think of for those wanting to get into the field. I'll briefly cover each of them and then leave you at it to do your own research and hopefully see you in the field someday as a pen tester. So let's take a look at some of these resources. Okay, so first resource is a shameless self-promotion. And I only do this because I do think that I'm a valuable resource. I'm trying not to be biased here, but I've got some good stuff that's completely free if you are interested in it. So if you come to youtube.com/c/thecybermentor, you can come to my page here and you can check out all the videos I have. One video is a day in the life of an ethical hacker. So if you want to know what it's like to be an ethical hacker, if you're still not sure if this is the field for you, this might be a video for you to view. It talks about the day in and day out stuff that you might do, what kind of assessment work you might be asked to do, and what it's really like to be an ethical hacker. On top of that, I've got another video on cyber career paths about penetration testing and ethical hacking. So if you're looking to get into the field and you want to become a pen tester or ethical hacker and you're not quite sure where to go, this is probably the better video for you. It kind of talks about all the knowledge that you'll need for a junior perspective and really the knowledge that you'll need to be successful in the field, including certifications, etc. So if you're watching this video as an additional resource, this would probably be additional resource part 2 is a good way to call it. This is the one like really detailed on penetration testing and ethical hacking. On top of that, over here, I've got playlists. So if you come into the playlist, I've got a few courses. Most importantly is our Zero to Hero course. So if we come to the cybermentor.com and you go to courses over here and you go to Zero to Hero pen testing, you can find more information on the syllabus. So I put it into a lesson plan as well here, but there are, 11 episodes. We start with Linux, kind of like you've already learned, note keeping, some introduction. We do Python for 2 weeks. We do information gathering, OSINT, recon, scanning, enumeration, exploitation. We do internal attacks as well. So we'll build out an Active Directory lab and we'll learn how to do these internal attacks that aren't really taught in a lot of courses. And then we'll end it with some file transfers, maintaining access, etc., report writing as well, and career advice. So this is like my complete course. It's called Zero to Hero to take somebody from from a complete zero and bring them into a hero where they can start doing some pen testing on their own. So again, if you're interested in that course, you can come to my website and check it out with the lessons plan. You can just click in the tab and play the video, or on my YouTube channel, you can click right on the playlist and play it from there as well. So leaving the shameless self-promotion, let me talk about some more cheap alternatives. Hack the Box is a great alternative if you're just getting started. So for Hack the Box, what it is it's a series of vulnerable machines. So you could think of it almost like a game. So if you want to do some hacking, this is a great place to just start practicing and learning the ropes. What we can do is, like, say we could pick something on the easy side. You want to look for something like that's more green right on the left because that shows easy. You would pick a box like this, you would scan against it, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, that's fine, but you would scan against it and try to find vulnerabilities and hack it. So really great website. If you have the VIP, they're starting to move it. It's in beta right now, but they have 20 boxes that you can attack on active side and 20 in the VIP. But the nice thing about the VIP is they're about to open up all 97 that have been retired. So they retire one every week and they bring a new one in. So you gain access. It's like $13 a month. This is free, completely free platform if you don't want it. But this is $13 a month for the VIP access. And you can come in here and do some of these machines that are super duper easy. And if you click into them, they'll have write-ups for them. And they'll also have video walkthroughs for a lot of these machines. So that's really great stuff, right? If you have no idea what you're doing, this is a great place to start because these retired boxes are boxes that have already been done. You can watch how somebody else did them. You can learn their methodology. And this is really good for just getting the basics down and understanding, some basic hacking. Same thing here with the virtual hacking labs. It's very similar. They've got a labs, they've got a course, and they've got different pricing. So you can try these out if you're interested in them. So they are, just alternatives to just practice online. Then you've got VulnHub as well. You'll have to search through this and try to find something that's like beginner level, or Google online, which are realistic boxes, or what are good boxes on VulnHub. But VulnHub, basically you just download the VMware file and you play it on VMware and you try to attack the machine. So you download a machine, you try to attack it. And these are intentionally vulnerable machines, all of these right here on these top three. So let's say that that's not really where you want to start. You think maybe you could use a little bit more hand holding, and you like a certification to come behind it. I'm going to show you the top three in my order that I think for pen testing, at least at a beginner to mid-tier level, what the top three are. So eLearn Security gets number 1 slot in my mind. If you come into here and you go on to certifications, so they've got a couple different ones. The ECPPT, or actually let's go to courses. So the penetration testing student and the penetration testing professional. The student is for the beginner. The professional's a little bit more advanced. It leaves off where the beginner ends. So if we come in the student, you can see some of the things that you'll learn. So they've got, it talks about the preliminary skills that you might need and teaches you those. It's got some programming and then just the basics of penetration testing, but it gives you an idea what it's like. On top of that, this PTP course they have is like more in-depth, more advanced. You start getting into assembly language and buffer overflows. You get into network pen testing, some PowerShell, Linux, web app, Wi-Fi, some Ruby for Metasploit. So I think this is really well-rounded, really up to date. The downside of this course is that it's not really well known on the HR side of things. So, and then the pricing can get a little expensive. On the elite side right now, it's $1,600. The cheapest is the $1,200. I would at least get the middle tier. But as of right now, they're offering that PTS and the PTP. If you buy the PTP, they give you the PTS for free. But that won't be going on much longer. But you can always hold out for deals like this as well. Another resource, and a very well-known resource, probably the best certification in terms of being known, is the OSCP. So it starts out at $800, as you can see here. You're probably going to spend more money than that because that's just 30 days. So the nice thing about this is it comes with labs. There's a certain amount of machines in there that you can try to hack against, sort of like a hack the box, but it's an environment. So you can, just attack whatever you feel like and try to navigate your way through the network. And then when you are done and you want to test for the certification, you have to actually hack in an environment of a set number of machines you have to hack against, and you have to be successful in hacking those machines to get your certification. So it's considered one of the more difficult certifications out there to achieve. And you'll see it come up a lot of times in HR or job applications that they want this OSCP. So this is something to look into and consider as well. The cost isn't as bad as the eLearn, but the con here is that offensive security courses haven't been updated in 5 or so years. So you really need to, it's kind of the best of both worlds if you were able to do both. But this one will get you into more doors. This one will get you a little bit more current. But there are plenty of resources out there. All these tabs I've shown you that you don't have to spend a ton of money to get this stuff. These are more things that if you want that certification, you want that coursework, that knowledge, these are great resources, all 3 of these. So last is the GPEN. Now the GPEN is just an exam. By itself, it's $1,700. It is by SANS, right? So this is showing GIAC. You actually have to take the corresponding SANS course that goes with it. And that course is upwards of $6,000. So unless you can get an employer to pay for this SANS certification, probably not the best. But the thing that I like about SANS is that it stays up to date. They are constantly updating their courses, and that they look good on a resume. It's one of those really high tier, high level certifications. And the exam, from what I hear, is actually pretty good. It's not a practical exam, but it's a fairly good exam. And the nice thing I didn't mention, eLearn Security is also practical. So this OSCP is practical. The eLearn Security exam is practical. You have to hack your way through to pass and write a report as well. This one is a multiple choice exam, I do believe. So these are 3 certifications that you can look into if you're wanting to go down that route. I would start with the PTS if you can. It's dirt cheap. If I have to make a recommendation, just to make sure that you're really interested in this. If you know for sure and you want to do that PTS PTP combo, this might be a good choice here. But other than that, I mean, the free resources, like I've got my channel. There's a ton of videos. The Zero to Hero course is like at least 20 to 30 hours of material. Hack the Box, you'll spend a lot of time on. There's plenty of write-ups. If you just Google, like, honestly, if we go into here and we say, like, Apocalypse here, if you say that and you Google that with write-up, you're going to find the write-up for this. Or you'll find a video for this. Or some kind of walkthrough, right? So you just want to look through these and try it on your own, and then go back and then watch the write-up and see how you could have improved if you got through it, or where you can improve an enumeration or whatever it is you need to get better to actually succeed the next time you try attacking these machines. So that is it. You have reached the end of this course and the end of the bonus material. If you need anything, I provided my contact info again in the beginning. I'm at the Cyber Mentor on Twitter. You can reach me on YouTube as well. And I really do thank you for joining me. I look forward to seeing many of you take the next step from this Linux. If you made it this far, you've already gotten through the beginner Linux, and that's awesome. I hope you take this next step and that you are intrigued by penetration testing, because we need more people in the field. So I look forward to seeing you guys and girls come through, and hopefully I'll work with some of you someday. So until next time, my name is Heath Adams, and I thank you for joining me.